Hello, and welcome to Game Development at Night. Normally, I would be starting my game development on Thursday, because Thursday is my day. But I have so much scheduled this week that I am just going to start early. So, there's a few projects I want to work on. There's the Playdate and C code example repository stuff. I started working on a font. I've been making fonts. They're not that good, but practice makes better work sometimes. And I still haven't written my foods song. And there's one other thing. What was the thing that I told myself to work on? I need to draw more public domain monsters. That's what I was going to do. Okay, so I worked for a while on getting a system set up in C, which made it harder, that could work with both the Playdate platform code and the SDL platform code. So this is kind of the structure I came up with. It was a little bit challenging because the Playdate has callbacks for update and various other actions. Whereas SDL, I just have like my int main, and then I kind of spin everything up myself. And then eventually, what I might end up doing later on, at some point, I think it would be good to do just from a business standpoint. Of course, using an actual engine by somebody else from a business standpoint would probably be the best. But just implementing something in there for Android, so I can make a game once, and then, PC is not going to get a whole lot of downloads, but Playdate and Android have a lot more discoverability in some ways. So that might be something to do later on. But for now, basically, with the Playdate, if I open the make file for the Playdate, it builds the PD system, functions, and pan system, as well as like relative or corresponding H files. But then my SDL build, I set up a code blocks project. So that one uses functions, structures, main, and then the pan and SDL systems. So we'll look at that. But basically, I was trying to create a common set of instructions in the agnostic layer, so that those could then be translated to the Playdate platform or the SDL platform. So for instance, I have pan system, and I currently only have font wrapped as a structure. I have structures here. So you'll see it checks the target. With SDL, it needs to have access to like the window and surface. The Playdate doesn't have anything in its system struct at the moment. Maybe when I add on to this to add more types like the image loading and stuff. We'll see. But then my font, I have a TTF font for SDL and an LCD font for Playdate. Then in the functions, I still have a lot of stuff commented out. But for instance, okay, so this part can't really be agnostic because with SDL we're loading a true type font, and with Playdate we're loading a pixel font or a bitmap font. So that part can't really be like agnostic, but the idea, the goal here is to not have any of these sorts of targets or, preprocessor things. The idea is to just have using the pan setup stuff. So this is like the gameplay functions. Functions.h and functions.c. And we can see this system pointer being passed around that for SDL contains the surface and the window. And then with the pan system, that is what we call kind of pass things down and say, okay, we need to do a system teardown. So call pan teardown, and then that is going to handle going to one or the other. And at the moment, really, for the setup, not a lot needs to happen. I have this for clear screen where we just clear it to a background color, and then clear screen with SDL. handle input I just have here at the moment because the Playdate test for fonts, I didn't put any sort of input. So that'll be another demo to make. And then how to draw text. So the SDL versus Playdate. Now, like if I were expanding this into a game engine or something, I would clean this up, but just to get stuff drawing on the screen, it looks like that. Or loading fonts, looks like that. So it took me kind of a while to get this all set up. And I know pan system and functions itself seem kind of redundant, but the idea is this is kind of the funnel. So with pan system, that would end up pointing to like, you know, point to the Playdate system. Oh, that didn't work out. Stop snapping. Point to the Playdate system and point to the SDL system and eventually point to the Android system. So it's kind of the funnel in between everything. Whereas the actual game code would be inside of the just functions.h. I would probably name that better later. So at the moment it's like this. There's not really any game logic, but that would go in the functions at the moment. So with our Playdate system, when we initialize Playdate, we have our event handler to check for the initialization state and the terminate state. So that's why our functions C is going to call pan setup, but pan setup isn't really going to do anything to the Playdate at this point, just because it already has a callback for that, so it directly calls the setup function. Again, like I'm not much of a C developer. I'm very much used to C++ and object-oriented programming style, so I had to like twist my brain around to figure out how I wanted to implement this. And some stuff in C, like if you wrote it the same code in C++, it would do one thing, but in C it does a different thing. So that is kind of a challenge. Here we have our system. I named this unused system just to show that they're not currently in use, but we need to pass those because the basic thing is going to pass this around. So that's going to be like screen within height, so eventually it won't be unused, but and then for the SDL, it's going to have the window and surface, and then also checking for fatal errors and want to quit. Whereas like the Playdate, you have a like a callback for actually terminating the program. Okay, so we have like a font wrapper, and I would do that for the other things as well, like images, audio. So when we go to load a font, we have our font struct. It tries to load it. This is font.font, maybe not the best name, but it'll store that and then it'll check to see if it is null pointer and then do that. So basically, here, let me open that over here. Main is for SDL only. Main is not used for the Playdate. It doesn't have a main function that we implement. That's all handled on their side. So, oops, I didn't mean to actually kill that. So this is the game startup. So I named it main SDL. If I were using Android NDK, it's been a long time since I've tried using Android NDK. I know I got some tests working successfully on my phone. Don't remember if we have an int main there as well, or if it's very callback heavy. That would be something I'd just go read some documentation on, but we would probably need a main SDL, or if we were doing something else that needed main, it'd be main Android or main blah blah blah, I don't know. So yeah, I set up the basic gameplay structure here, and then while the game is running, it handles input, updates, and draws. So it does the basic game loop thing. And then down here, I have it commented out, but I got like the lazy foo tutorial on rendering images, or sorry, fonts, all set up first in just main on its own, so I could, you know, get that working and remember how that works. But then from there, you know, I used it for reference while trying to implement this weird system to try to make it cross-platform. So all of this is in my GitLab repository. So this whole thing has the different types of tests. We have how to do things with Lua. We have how to do things with C. This is for the Playdate specifically. And then this is my kind of mix to do both. So For instance, if I run I'll just run my Playdate compile script. It should still build. I'm always afraid it's going to stop building. Playdate run. And so it just literally says hello world whenever it eventually starts. There we go. And so there's hello world, and I'll close that. And then to run the SDL version, I just made a code blocks project to make it a bit easier on myself. And so it has my font. I didn't mean to add the font in there, but we can run it. And in this case, I just have a magenta background. And this is the font, one of the fonts I made, which is really ugly. But again, I'm going to either have to figure out if I want to, from the SDL side, load a bitmap font and deal with all of that, or there might be a library out there. I'm sure there's some sort of library. Or look through the Playdate documentation to see if they have a TrueType font support. Don't know about that. Haven't noticed it in the documentation. But yeah, so I have all these demos. I did a Pickin Sticks in C, and I have all these in Lua. And then, just like having basic draw text, button press, all of these in a vacuum for C and Playdate, my next goal is to do the same for C and SDL with Playdate. So in that process, I'll be kind of developing the weird little system that I made, figuring out maybe a better way to design things. But that's kind of my goal. So I don't know. I'll try to work on some of it tonight. Oh, there's some Homestuck screenshots because I've been reading that for a podcast. And yeah. So next step is how do we, I guess, handle input would be the next thing. We can just kind of build off on that. Okay, so it is the next day, and I have done a sound test thing as well. It took me a little bit to get it working, but basically let's go ahead and look at these files. So with the SDL version, it pops up, it's play and music. I can hit the left action button to toggle on and off, and the other button does a sound. I don't have like volume controls in here, but what I've done is I've moved all of my SDL stuff into pan system, and I got rid of that other SDL file, the SDL system, just because I figured it would be easier to do this way. But for the Playdate side, I still need the Playdate system file, just because of those callbacks and such. But new structures, I have added sound and file players in the Playdate side, and then basically a structure to wrap the sound and music file types. Then in the pan system, we have our functions for, this is all really ugly because of the defines, but like loading sound, trying to load sound. We have the Playdate version and the SDL version, freeing the sound, playing, loading music, all of that sort of stuff, playing, stopping, pause, resume, toggle. So all of that is working. The SDL program, again, this isn't changed, it's just the game functions are in functions.c. So we're adding these file loadings, playing the music at the start, trying to make sure to free things, checking in this case for which buttons are being held down, and then displaying a message, and also toggling music or playing the sound. So that's kind of the agnostic layout of this. For the Playdate side, that's just going to be, I wonder if I can just open it in here by clicking and dragging. Nope. I don't want to add it to the project because the SDL project does not need Playdate files. I mean, I guess I could technically put them in, but then put them in the if not defined thing, but okay. So with the Playdate, we still have our event handler, which starts, kicks off the setup and the teardown. Here we have setup, so we just have that update callback, and now I added something to just list the files. I was having a little bit of trouble with the pathing for my audio file, but turns out I need to pass the name of the file for the playdate, and then I added this on for the SDL part, so it just concatenates those. But for the playdate, you just pass in the audio file name. So if I run this, like playdate compile, and then playdate run, doop. I'll bring this up. So I could pause, toggle pause, play a sound. Over here is where it's displaying the files in the working directory, so that was a callback as well. I just did that so I could see what is in the working directory. Spoilers, it's all the stuff in here. That's the stuff. So, yeah, I just wanted to double check and make sure. Then otherwise, there's not a lot to do for the teardown. I have stuff in the pan system as well. So I'm trying to keep stuff in here as much as possible, but then any sort of special stuff I need to do for Playdate is in here. So there's the sound freeing on the Playdate side. Here's my stuff for getting input. That's all stored inside of a struct. So if we open that up, where is structures? So again, we have the input states. I added, are we inactive, push down, held down, begin release. So those are the different states. The playdate or just checks for those automatically. With SDL, I had to do some other stuff. So it's kind of ugly code. Here, let me just open up in here. Pan system. So I'm basically just going between states. So this is my input code. So if the key is down and we were inactive, start begin push. If the key was at begin push, then just change it to held down. So it kind of transitions from inactive, begin push, held down. And then for key up, it's either held down to release, or it was begin release and now inactive. Well, that's different, but it could be either held down to, it could be begin push to begin release. But then the update, I believe, there's the initialization. And then with update, if we are on begin release, and I guess it changes it to inactive. So I'm still trying to figure this out and how to like structure everything nicely. But as far as additional tests, technically I could do save load files. I already did that with just pure Playdate and C. At this point, I might go ahead and split this off because I feel like I have enough examples for SDL and Playdate together that I can just kind of split off into a little game engine thing. But with the save load files, we have like file opening and reading and then saving. I did an animated bitmap table for the C and SDL, or sorry, C and Playdate by itself. I've done sprite sheets in SDL. It's just a matter of remembering all this stuff. But yeah, so I have a old repository that I never did anything with, but the simple date is what I was going to name my SDL/Playdate combination thing. So I'll probably just reuse this repository. I'll probably rename it because I didn't really do anything in 2022. We'll just change this to 2024. I like to have my repositories in order by year. So if you go to the MOOS-A-DEE path, you can see my oldest stuff. 2001. Do I actually have the Visual Basic source code? Oh no, I think I just have the exe file. I don't have a lot of my Visual Basic source code. I did not know anything about source control back then. And this is like college, going to university for bachelor's degree, and then after that, And so all of that's here, even if it was abandoned, you can kind of see in the description. That's just a side note. This is my JavaScript engine, but if we are successful with this C SDL plus Playdate thing, it could also just literally be used for with Emscriptum to make them a web-based game as well. And I will make my friend Mike help me with that. Hello, Mike. And let's see, what else? Again, I might try to go through some Android documentation. But at this point, what I'm going to do next is probably just start moving things into the simple date. I don't know if I still want to name it that, but, you know, to make a little tiny engine for now and then test some more things out. Then implement Pickin Sticks again, I guess. Alright, so we got some good stuff going. I went ahead and I pulled that code from the last demo out into its own repository. And I'm starting to build the Omelet engine instead of SimpleDate. I just repurposed that that repository. So in here, we have, I moved the functions.agency into here and renamed it Omelet Base. Omelet Engine, this stuff is in here. Those don't need to be inside there. The assets themselves are inside of build SDL and build Playdate. So technically with like SDL, I could colorize the images and have like a different set of assets just because there's going to be differences. I already mentioned that the fonts are different. So, yeah, let's just do this for example. I'll make this an alien Pickin Sticks. And so, bright red hair. And then coming back to SDL after so long of spending time with SFML instead, I'm just like, oh yeah, I have to write a frame rate timer. I have to write, or I have to, like, I follow the lazy food tutorials on how to actually get transparent backgrounds. So we'll do that. We'll color in the ground. So let's use a light color, I guess, and recolor these little grasses to a green. And then we will grab that stick and paint it brown because it is a stick. And then here's leaves. Okay. So here's our lovely colorized version of Pickin Sticks. And then the Playdate will have its own assets, which are the here, assets, graphics. The audio is the same. However, Playdate requires uncompressed WAV files. And I don't think that's the case with SDL. I am currently loading WAV files, but I could make that more compressed. So you could save space with that. So let's go ahead. I have too many windows open. We have the code blocks project. So again, the base game main is just in here. And then as far as the game code, you would be writing it in here and then adding on to the Omelet game. I just have this as kind of a template. So I don't know, writing C code is weird, so I like to structure things together just so it's all in one place, kind of. Loading in the data, you know, we're just using that pan set of functions, so we don't have to write it multiple times. This code is used for the Playdate version and the SDL version. And then our basic data, our basic functionality, input, keep the player on the screen. If we hit the stick, then pick it up, add to score. All of this could be erased. This is just from the previous test. Draw the ground. I currently have the ground as just one big image, as you saw, because for the Playdate, I did make a game where it loaded in tiles, and that was very slow on the hardware, so I ended up keeping the tile regions for collision, but then just having a flat image for that game in particular. So, yeah, all of that. Then I have PD system in here, but it's currently commented out. I just thought maybe I'd make updates. But then I had already changed my preprocessors to be very, very faint. So if we look at pan system, it's a lot easier to see just the SDL stuff and not kind of see the visual clutter of the Playdate code. But it is still in there. So I did have to implement a timer system. So, yeah. So the SDL set has the timer and keeping track of ticks and frames per second. I think this can just be an SDL, but I created a utilities file, so I'll put like reusable code in here. And then that's basically it, just adding on to this. The other thing I'll need to do is like animated sprites and like sprite sheets, grabbing parts of a sprite sheet to display. I have not done that yet. I did it on the just plain C and Playdate. That's loud. I'm gonna turn this down. But yeah, it's playing audio. Another thing I'll need to add is like just being able to resize the screen. It's been a while since I worked with SDL. But I've done this sort of stuff with my C++ game engine, where you can just kind of have your default resolution here, and then you can blow it up and then still work with the default resolution coordinates, and it just renders it bigger because it's on a render window or render surface or something, I don't know. So a lot of starting from scratch, writing that boilerplate code, but it'll be kind of fun. Plus, like with making games for Playdate and that hardware, like I said, building a game with a big tile map isn't going to be very efficient. So it'll kind of keep me making small games with this sort of thing, which could also be good for mobile and for web-based program. Okay, so here's, Pickin Sticks in color. We'll leave that over here. And then if I build the Playdate version, I shouldn't have to compile it, but we'll do it. Now I'm going to have the music playing in both places, but there it is. I'm just going to mute this one. So same thing, I can use the arrow keys, same gameplay, same audio. I don't have crank implemented, crank input. I'd have to figure out how I would want to like simulate that on the SDL side. Okay, I don't think my computer can handle OBS and the simulator and my game, and I don't even know what else. It just is it time to upgrade my computers? It is very hard to edit video on this thing. I have to specifically set up proxy videos in low resolution so I can actually edit my videos. So that is all here. I set it up as MIT license. It's not really very usable for just anyone right now, but I'm going to be adding on to it, and then maybe I'll make some little test games before getting into like my next main project. But that is kind of all I've done today. I'll keep working on it probably later today. I have to go get ready. We're going to go see go to a fertility clinic that we've been to in the past and start talking about doing IVF. So, and beyond that, I got so many meetings on Friday. So beyond the meeting that I have today, I'm just going to do some game development and spend time for myself because it's Thursday and it's my day. And it's nice and rainy, so I don't have to water my garden.